They say that in a place like the San Diego Wildlife Park, you see everything. I've spent 15 years watching lions claim their kingship and elephants mourn their ancestors, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for Punch. Punch was a young Japanese macaque, a snow monkey with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of an old soul. He arrived at our facility after a complicated rescue, and from day one, he was different. Usually, macaques are the social butterflies of the primate world. They squabble, they groom, they form tight-knit cliques that would make a high school cheerleading squad look unorganized. But Punch? He was an island. I remember the first time we tried to introduce him to the main troop. We call it socialization, but it felt more like a first date where one person refuses to speak. The troop leader, a burly male we called Clyde, approached Punch with a neutral grunt, a peace offering. Any other monkey would have submissively groomed him or chirped back. Punch just backed away, his small hands trembling, and retreated to the furthest corner of the enclosure. He didn't want their hierarchy. He didn't want their games. He looked at his own kind as if they were aliens from another galaxy. Days turned into weeks, and the isolation began to take its toll. Punch stopped eating the fresh fruit we provided. He sat hunched over, staring at the concrete floor, his vibrant fur growing dull. It's a haunting thing to see an animal give up on life. We tried everything, different enrichment toys, specialized treats, even moving him to a quieter section. Nothing worked. He was fading right in front of our eyes, a victim of a loneliness that no medicine could cure. One Tuesday, after a particularly grueling shift, I saw my colleague Sarah standing by the gift shop storage. She was holding a discarded plush toy, a simple, oversized stuffed monkey with long arms and a soft, fuzzy belly. It was meant for a toddler, not a primate. "Mark, look at this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He doesn't want us. He doesn't want them. Maybe he just needs something that won't judge him." I thought it was a long shot. Actually, I thought it was crazy. You don't give a wild animal a teddy bear and expect a miracle. But as I looked at Punch through the observation glass, small, shivering, and utterly alone, I realized we were out of options. I took the plush toy from Sarah. It felt light, almost fragile. I opened the door to Punch's enclosure, my heart hammering against my ribs. He didn't even look up. I gently placed the toy on the straw-covered floor, about 5 feet away from him, and backed out slowly. For a long time, nothing happened. Punch didn't move. The stuffed animal just sat there, its glass eyes reflecting the afternoon sun. Then, ever so slowly, Punch tilted his head. He sniffed the air. He crawled forward one hesitant inch at a time until he was close enough to touch it. What happened next is something I will never forget as long as I live. I held my breath, watching through the thick glass of the observation room. Punch reached out a trembling gray hand. His fingers, usually so quick and restless, moved with a delicacy I'd never seen. He touched the synthetic fur of the plush toy, a soft, honey-colored fabric, and immediately pulled back as if it would bite or bark. The toy, of course, did nothing. It just sat there, its stitched-on smile offering a silent, unchanging comfort. Punch waited. 10 seconds. 30. A minute. Then he leaned in and sniffed it. He grabbed the toy's long plush arm and pulled it closer, and then in a moment that brought a lump to my throat, he didn't just hold it. He climbed into its lap. He curled his small body into the soft chest of the stuffed animal, buried his face in its faux fur, and let out a long, shuddering breath. For the first time in months, his shoulders relaxed. "He thinks it's his mother," Sarah said from behind me. I could hear the crack in her voice. From that day on, Punch and Mama, as the keepers started calling the toy, were inseparable. It wasn't just a toy anymore, it was his anchor. If he moved to the climbing structure, Mama was slung over his shoulder. If he went to the feeding station, Mama sat right next to him, her plush face dusted with grain. But the most incredible change was his spirit. Punch started eating again. His coat regained its healthy sheen, and those hollow, haunted eyes began to sparkle with a quiet intelligence. He still didn't care for the other macaques, and honestly, they didn't know what to make of him. Clyde, the alpha, would sometimes watch from a distance, tilting his head at the sight of this small monkey hugging a lifeless bundle of fluff. To the troop, it was madness. To Punch, it was survival. Word began to spread. At first, it was just the zoo staff from other departments dropping by during their lunch breaks. "Is it true?" they'd ask. "Do we really have a monkey with a teddy bear?" Then came the local news. A reporter from a San Diego station did a short segment on the loneliest monkey who found a friend. Within 48 hours, the clip went viral. We're talking millions of views overnight. People from all over the country and soon the world were captivated by the image of this little macaque clinging to his plush protector. Our quiet corner of the park was suddenly swamped. Families started lining up before the gates even opened, kids clutching their own stuffed monkeys, all hoping to catch a glimpse of Punch. We had to hire extra security just to manage the crowds. But amidst the flashing cameras and the excited whispers of the tourists, I noticed something that worried me. Punch wasn't looking at the crowds. He wasn't looking at the other macaques. He only looked at Mama. He would sit for hours, shielding her from the gaze of the public, his grip tightening whenever the noise got too loud. I started to wonder, had we saved him, or had we just built him a beautiful, plushy prison? We had given him a reason to live, but he was still an island, and in the wild, an island eventually gets weathered away by the sea. One afternoon, a heavy storm rolled in off the coast. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the wind began to howl through the enclosure. Usually, the macaques huddle together in the heated indoor shelter, sharing body heat and comfort. But as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, I saw Punch sitting outside, right in the center of the yard. He was hunched over Mama, trying to protect her from the rain with his own small body. He was shivering violently, but he wouldn't move. He wouldn't leave her behind in the wet grass. "Mark," Sarah shouted over the thunder, "we have to get him inside. If that toy gets soaked, it'll be ruined and he'll lose his mind." I grabbed my rain gear, but as I headed for the gate, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the enclosure's dirt into a slick, muddy mess. Punch was drenched, his fur spiked and dripping, but he refused to move. He had wrapped his arms and legs around Mama, trying to protect the plush toy from the downpour. But a stuffed animal is like a sponge. It was soaking up the water, becoming heavy, cold, and gray. I was halfway to the gate when I saw Clyde, the alpha of the troop. Normally, during a storm, Clyde would be the first inside the heated den, claiming the best spot for himself. But instead, he was standing at the edge of the shelter, watching Punch. Clyde took a step out into the rain, then another. He approached the shivering little macaque with a slow, deliberate gait. I froze. If Clyde decided to show dominance now, he could easily hurt Punch, or worse, rip the toy apart. I reached for my radio, ready to call for backup, but Sarah grabbed my arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Just watch." Clyde reached Punch. The little monkey looked up, his eyes wide with terror, clutching his heavy, waterlogged toy even tighter. He let out a small, defensive whimper. Clyde didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth. Instead, he reached out and gently nudged Punch's shoulder with his head, a classic primate gesture of "follow me." Punch hesitated. He looked at the warm, dry den, then back at his soaking wet mother. He tried to lift the toy, but it was too heavy now, weighted down by pounds of water. He couldn't carry her alone. Then, the unthinkable happened. Clyde reached down, grabbed one of the plush toy's long arms in his teeth, and began to pull. Together, the alpha and the outcast dragged the heavy stuffed animal across the muddy yard and into the safety of the dry shelter. The rest of the troop moved aside, making room for the strange trio. The next morning, the sun came out, but the world had changed for Punch. The video of the rescue in the rain went even more viral than the first one. We were now a global phenomenon. People weren't just coming to see a lonely monkey. They were coming to see a symbol of unlikely friendship. But with fame came a different kind of pressure. The zoo's board of directors saw dollar signs. They started selling replicas of Punch's toy in the gift shop, thousands of them. They wanted to move Punch to a bigger, more theatrical enclosure with better lighting for cameras. They even suggested we replace the old, tattered mama with a brand new, pristine one every week so she would look better in photos. He doesn't need a new one, I argued in the boardroom, my voice rising. That toy isn't a prop. To him, it's a living being. If you swap it out, you'll break his heart. Mark, look at the numbers, the director said, pointing to a glowing screen. People want to see the celebrity monkey. They don't want to see a dirty, matted rag. We have to maintain the image. I went back to the enclosure that evening, feeling like a traitor. Punch was sitting on the highest branch, grooming the ears of his old, stained toy. He looked peaceful. He didn't know he was a brand. He didn't know that people thousands of miles away were arguing over his marketability. As I watched him, I realized that the crowd's love was a double-edged sword. They loved the idea of Punch, but they didn't truly see him. They saw a character in a story, not a living creature with a fragile mind. That's when the first incident happened. A tourist, desperate for a perfect photo, leaned too far over the safety railing. They dropped a bright red plastic whistle right into the enclosure. Punch, curious as always, hopped down to investigate. But as he reached for the whistle, a group of teenagers started shouting and banging on the glass to get his attention. The noise was deafening. Punch panicked. He grabbed Mama and tried to run, but in his haste, he tripped. The toy flew out of his hands and landed right in the middle of the other macaques, who were already agitated by the noise of the crowd. The world seemed to slip into slow motion. Punch stood frozen, watching as his plush mother lay in the dirt just a few feet away from him. One of the younger, more aggressive males, hyped up by the shrieking of the crowd, hopped toward the toy and gave it a violent yank. The sound of tearing fabric echoed against the glass. Punch let out a sound I will never forget as long as I live. It wasn't just an animal's cry. It was the heartbroken wail of a child losing their entire world. But instead of running away in fear, he did something no one expected. He didn't lash out. He didn't fight. He simply walked over to the toy, sat down on the cold ground, and wrapped his body over it, shielding the tattered plush with his own back to take any incoming blows. The sight caused the entire crowd to go silent. Suddenly, the camera flashes died down. The people who had been shouting and banging on the glass just seconds ago finally saw him, not as an internet star, but as a small, vulnerable soul whose heart was breaking in plain sight. In that moment of heavy silence, Clyde stepped forward again. The alpha male placed a heavy, grounding hand on Punch's shoulder, and the rest of the troop backed off. They finally accepted him. Not because he was strong, but because his loyalty was more powerful than their chaos. Sarah and I stepped in immediately. We carefully retrieved the toy for medical attention. That night, Sarah stayed late, hand-stitching every tear on that old matted plush. The zoo's directors, seeing the public's shift from amusement to genuine respect, finally backed down. They realized that Punch's story wasn't about marketing. It was about honoring someone else's pain. Punch lived with us for many more years. He never became the life of the party, but he was never an outcast again. The troupe accepted him along with his strange, fuzzy companion. Over time, the toy became incredibly old, faded, and almost unrecognizable. But to Punch, it remained the most beautiful thing in the world. When Punch's time finally came to leave us, we found him one morning in the quiet of the sleeping quarters. He looked as if he had simply fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep, still tightly clutching his old mama to his chest. Even in his very last moment, he wasn't alone.